Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to the JSMA to hear our guest speaker tonight, Ka'ila Farrell-Smith. We especially want to extend a warm welcome to Ka'ila, who was raised in Eugene, and she's joined tonight by her mother, Jane Farrell, who's affiliated with the Early Childhood Cares program, and her brother. And I know that many of you in the audience also knew Ka'ila's father, Al Smith, who passed away in 2015. We're just so honored to have you with us tonight. I'm Cheryl Hartup, the Associate Curator of Academic Programs in Latin American Art. And Ka'ila is going to share with us her creative process, studio practice, her research interests, her work, and also a lens on contemporary Indigenous art and culture. Last year, Ka'ila very generously welcomed me into her home, and we're so grateful to her for lending us two amazing works, Enrollment and Unerasing Indian, which are upstairs on view in our exhibition, Conversations in the Roundhouse, Roots, Roads, and Remembrances. And this exhibit was organized in response to UO's Common Reading program, which is a year of conversation around a shared book. And it's part of our Common Seeing initiative here at the JSMA, which was launched by our director, Jill Hartz. I want to thank my colleague, Danielle Knapp, who's the McCosh Associate Curator, and we worked together on the exhibition, and Beth Robinson Hartpence, the JSMA's art preparator and conservator. She introduced the curatorial staff to Ka'ila Farrell-Smith and her work, and also advised Danielle and I on this project. So a few other folks I want to thank: Julie Volker-Morris and Kirby Brown, University historian and archivist Jennifer O'Neill. They've all supported our journey to present work that investigates the diverse way artists with ties to Indigenous cultures approach community, identity, representation, geography, memory, colonization, and issues of violence and racism. So it's my pleasure to introduce Ka'ila Farrell-Smith, a visual artist of Klamath, Modoc, Irish and French descendancy. She's a professor of Indigenous Nations Studies at Portland State University and co-director of Signal Fire, an amazing Wildlands Artist Residency program. She has exhibited her work widely. I'll just mention a few places: the Medici Fortress in Cortona, Italy, Tacoma Art Museum, Missoula Art Museum, and Portland Art Museum, where she has work in their permanent collection. This spring, she's going to make an incredible installation for the exhibition Water in the West at the High Desert Museum in Bend. So trek on out to Bend and see that. I'm sure it's going to be something we won't want to miss. She has attended internationally renowned artist residencies, including the new Institute of American Indian Arts and AIR program in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She received a BFA in painting from Pacific Northwest College of Art and an MFA in Contemporary Art Practices Studio from Portland State University. Please join me in welcoming Ka'ila Farrell-Smith.
Waklisi, Gausasas Ka'ila, Nua Uksik Inii, Nua Modakni'i, Sep Ge'eka. Hello, how's everybody doing tonight? Good, okay. Hold on, let me figure out how to work this. That's the button. All right. Tonight we're going to be having a discussion, a lens on contemporary Indigenous art and culture. And the first things that I like to do when I give an artist talk and presentation is acknowledge Indigenous land that we are on. And I wanted to share with you this photo and image from my ancestral homelands. So I introduced myself in the Klamath language and said, hey, how's it going? My name is Ka'ila, and I'm from the Klamath and Modoc nations. And so this is our ancestral homeland. My father, Al Smith, grew up on the Williamson River. And this is beautiful, it's powerful, and it's a very sacred place. So when I do an artist talk, I like to go over my goals as an Indigenous artist. And so you can see here there's a map of the lands that we're on. And we want to acknowledge that we're on the Indigenous lands of the Kalapuya peoples. So you can see that here. And so you can see down south, there's Klamath. That's where we're from, on the lakes there. So another one of my goals as an artist is to indigenize. I'm always working to perpetuate aesthetics and an indigenous paradigm. I'm always working on this lifelong process to decolonize the Western settler colonial lens on Indigenous art and culture. And so I do that through presentations, through exhibiting, and through making talks like this and putting together presentations. And I'm also a professor and teacher, so I can work with students that way. I'm always working in an intergenerational Indigenous arts education model. So I'm a student and also a mentor. And then as a teacher, this is very integral into my artistic practice. So here's another map. I just want you all to kind of get a sense of where we are. Okay, so through this presentation, I'm going to first share about my studio art and creative practice, and then we're going to go into looking at more of my community-based art practice and activism. I'm also going to share with you about my teaching philosophy, and then go into influences and inspirations. So with my studio art practice, it is comprised of mainly, I love to paint, so I do identify as a painter. But my work, there's a lot of research. I do artist residencies and navigating tribal histories. So this is one of my earlier works. And when I say that, I really kind of dove into my professional practice, after graduate school, which was in 2014. So I was working on this painting when I was getting my MFA in contemporary art practices at Portland State University. And so through this piece, I was, there was this nostalgia and going back through the memories of growing up with, really incredible parents, but with a really incredible man, my father, Al Smith. And, I grew up with his stories of collecting wokus on the lakes and, being in the canoe and harvesting our indigenous food sustenance with his grandma. And so that was really, that memory and story is sort of what inspired a lot of my early work that I was doing in graduate school. So like what I was pushing and researching and exploring. So here's an image of my friend and colleague, Natalie Ball, and Natalie M. Ball, and she's a Klamath tribal member and artist. And here's an image of her harvesting wokus in the Klamath Lakes with family and friends this last summer. So I kind of wanted to get you a sense of like where art is inspired by, but also what that's inspiring in life practices and how we're, as artists, we're working to go back, to these connections, making these ancestral connections with our homelands. And so our work does influence each other, and so I'll talk a little bit about that later. So here's an image of a dugout canoe, and you can see the wokus is on the tule mats. So this is from a book that I was researching at the Burke Museum studying Klamath baskets. And a lot of these kind of photographs and books are very informational to us when we're doing these mentorships and learning how to carve and learning how to create, the traditional art forms. This piece is called After Boarding School in Mourning. This is the painting that was purchased by the Portland Art Museum, so it's in the permanent collection. So if you go up there, you can check that out. So this piece, again, a lot of this stuff is emotional for me. So talking about all of this stuff, the work that I do under this lens of decolonization and re-indigenization, it's pretty heavy stuff. It's personal, and I'm working through my own emotions, and that's part of the artistic practice. And so coming out and giving public presentations about it I put this together in the ones to share with you about a much larger story that's not just mine. This is most people in Indian country and the Native communities. Their parents or grandparents were taken to boarding schools, and so that's what this painting was about. And so the motto was "Kill the Indian, save the man." And a lot of these kids, their hair was cut, and they weren't, they had to stop speaking their language and practicing their culture, and it was a way to assimilate them into the dominant white culture, and that was really traumatic. It was really traumatic for our. And it's still impacting us today. And so there's a scholar, Melissa K. Nelson, in a book called Original Instructions, where she has an essay where she talks about mending split-headedness through trickster consciousness. And that's actually the name of the essay. But it's really fascinating because she talks about kind of this, after the boarding school era, we're all sort of in this split-headedness where you're in two worlds, you're in two different worlds. And so in some essence, my practice kind of navigates in between all of that. So this is an image of some of the Klamath 1864 treaty signers, and that treaty was signed in 1864. This photo was taken in 1886, and my older brother Matthew Smith has been doing a lot of family research, and we just found out this is our ancestor. The guy with the nice mustache. His name is Jack Palmer. So we're still figuring out exactly. I think he's he's Emma Ball's brother. So my great uncle. He'd be my great uncle. Thanks, Mom. It's good to have family in the audience.
His father was your great grandfather.
So Palmer, and then Palmer was his treaty signer as well as Jack Palmer. So like doing this work, it's pretty intense stuff when you're tracking your lineage and your ancestry and doing this research. It's a lot of work, but so you can see where the fascination with figure. So going back into kind of an art talk, right? I just see my friend that was in the audience. She would know how much I love to draw faces and portraits. And so that's kind of how my art practice started, was just like doodling and drawing in faces. And so once I got into high school, got into art, I had a good art teacher over in Wiesbaden, Germany, and that put me on that path and that track. I found out that there was something called art school, and I was like, all right, that's the school I want to go to. And so this was a piece where I also was working on this, it was when I was in grad school, and I was getting ready for my thesis exhibition. And so this piece is called Enrollment, and this is one of the paintings that's in the exhibition. And here, at this point, I had really pushed myself and pushed my work from being very figurative, like the last two pieces I showed, which were rooted in, there's portraiture and landscape, where with Wokus Gatherers, you can really see that the horizon line was starting to get pushed up, and I was becoming very fascinated with just this blue, the blue field of that painting. And at this point, I wanted to come back to the figure, because the figure is very powerful and it can tell a lot of stories. And I've learned that through interactions of working and giving lectures and talks to the docents of the Portland Art Museum and hearing feedback of the power of that piece after boarding school in Mourning in telling parts of the story to audiences and to students that come through. And I'm seeing I can see the similar power in this, how this painting can tell a story. So my tribal enrollment number is kind of etched into the red paint on the stripes. This is a Hudson Bay blanket that I'm referencing. So there's a reference of that another painful part of the history. That's genocide from biological warfare that was putting smallpox and diseases in blankets and giving them to the indigenous communities. And this stuff happens, and it's hidden and it's erased and it's not talked about in our culture. And a lot of people don't learn about this in the schools. And so, that's why I went back to art. I was studying art, but then I went into activism, and I did that for a long time. And then I realized, I think that art has a lot of power. So that's why I chose to go back to grad school after about 8 years of doing community organizing and consumer and environmental organizing and doing that kind of work. So I was kind of had a political. Sorry, welcome. Come on in. There's some seats up front that are reserved too for folks. Seeing people come in. So this painting though, so there's that painful parts of the history that I want people to know about. And I think what triggered wanting to use the Hudson Bay blanket is that I was seeing how popular it was becoming, and it was becoming trendy again, and people were wearing it on their sneakers, and they were, you know, like it was this cool. I live in Portland, so there's gentrification and there's hipster culture. It was like, it's really cool to have one of these Hudson Bay blanket designs. So, I'm sorry, I'm being distracted by folks are coming in. Welcome, Farrell, welcome, come on in. There's 2 received certs up received. Yeah, Annie and Anita, welcome. My aunties just came in. Okay. This piece, though, is also very inspirational. There's like an empowerment that's happening. And I'm really thinking a lot about what is that? What is blood quantum? What is it to be tribally enrolled? And that it's sort of, it bounds you in some ways, but it also gives you, it's also, there's just a lot. And in that colonization that's linked in with, tribal enrollment and blood quantum issues. These are issues we're dealing with within our own communities. And there's racism and oppression, lateral oppression that happens. And so this piece was sort of you can see with the boarding school piece, the hair was cut after the boarding school. And in this piece, the hair is long again. And this figure is, and with these paintings, I was really intentionally making them gender neutral. So this figure, some people read it differently, but there's a song. It's sort of like either a song or a prayer that's happening. So those are some of the thoughts I have, I guess, about this piece that's in the upstairs hanging in the exhibition. This is a new book. I recommend you all get it or check it out, or library should get it. It's called Not Your Princess, Voices of Native American Women. And the painting enrollment is used in that book. So it's another way that art can be disseminated. The other piece that was in the show here is called Unerasing Indian. So I worked on these paintings last year when I was at Jurassic, which is an artist residency. So with my work, I teach a class. I teach like 1 class a year, and then I like to apply to artist residencies so I can go and not be distracted and can just focus and get a lot of work done. So this series was of 6 paintings, and I was reading a book called Indigenous Peoples' History of the United States, and I was in California, and it was Woodside, California is like right outside of San Francisco, up in the mountains. And it's weird, like how these residencies sometimes are started. I'm thinking about all these different histories. And so it was like the meteor showers were happening at that time. And somehow, I can't remember exactly where the lavender came in, but the lavender, my palette totally changed, and I was wanting more like a calming, peaceful color. I think some of the really bright colors I was using before, I wanted to work on in a different palette. So it has the Klamath basket design in it, and it has some text in it. And so getting text into my work, that's hard. Working with text in paintings is a tricky business. So I paint most of these on the floor, and they're spinning, or on tables, and so they're spinning around many different ways, and I don't really know which way I'm gonna hang it until the whole series is done. So this says Unerasing Indian, and so you can see I was using very intentionally like gold paint, copper paint, and I was thinking about resource extraction. Standing Rock was happening at that time, and I was really feeling the draw to want to need to go there and put my prayers down with what was happening there. And so there was a lot of political intensity, but I was also in this very calming place. And so this series, and I was also researching my Klamath basket design because I was in a mentorship with Corning Gould, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But so here's the whole series. You can see them all together, and they're kind of functioning as a long landscape. So as individuals, they're working compositionally. They're working. They're strong individually, but together they do come into this. So you can see I'm working on the paintings here. Oh yeah, okay, let's move in. So then I'm going through kind of chronologically pretty fast a lot of work that I've been doing in my studio practice, but this is hanging up at the Alani Casino. I got a commission at the end of last year, like right when I got back from visiting Standing Rock. And it was funny. This is the first time I've kind of made art for a commercial. Like it was a commission, and they very specifically wanted some horses in it. And so I was like, okay, go back to the horses, which is something it influenced me a long time ago, earlier in my career. And I'm nothing against horses, but everybody's just like, oh, you could go to Santa Fe and sell it. And I was like, I don't want to just go to Santa Fe and sell horse paintings or just salmon paintings. You know, I had a lot more that I wanted to express. And so, but I did. I went back, and here's a reference to the ledger art. So I was referencing the ledger art with the horse design there. And then below is based off of a painting that I had made when I was at Caldera. So in 2015, I believe that's when I was there. And Caldera is outside of Sisters, Oregon. So I was surrounded by all these beautiful mountains in the Cascade region. And so that's sort of, and so this is huge. They're each 4 by 4 feet. So it was to fill a wall space 8 by 8 feet. And that's the installation looks. But I'm gonna ask them to move those lights because it's driving me crazy. Let's see, last April I was down in Santa Fe and working at Institute, IAIA, what does that stand for? Institute of American Indian Art. And it was really, really great to have this gigantic studio space. And so I'm used to working in like, you know, well, not anymore, but like, you know, basements or very small rooms. And, you know, like trying to find places to make art is tough. And it's a full-time job to have to be able to have a studio in the city. And so the residencies are really great because you're going and you have a lot of space and you have time and freedom. And then this was exciting because it was a college, you know, it was all Native artists are studying at this college. And yeah, it was really great. So the Santa Fe really did impact me, and I was working on, so with this image, I was working on these large exhibition banners. I found them in the room, and they were exhibition banners from like back to the 1960s and 70s. Like they've been having art shows right down there for alumni students. And they were these really cool banners, and they were gonna, I don't know if they were gonna throw them away, but I asked if I could use them because I had so much space. So I set up so here I ended up with 4 paintings that I worked on. And so I went there to make small work, like my small panel pieces, but ended up doing this as well. And it was exciting because students would just come through and you can just talk. And yeah, it was a really great model to be able to just hang out with students, talk about their careers. A lot of them had gone through the art market down there and felt constricted with having to make a specific kind of work to sell because it's a lot of money comes through. So, you know, commodification and capitalism really impacts artists in how they can make a living and how they can, so be able to make your own art and to be free in that it's a tricky thing to navigate. And so we talked a lot about that down there. So you can see there's parts of the banners that are left. Like this this face was part of it. This did say Indian time at one point, and these are parts of the original banners that I left on. And so when I'm working in the studio, I'm messy. I make a mess. I get paint on everything and just flying, and I'm reading books and just like scribbling notes all the time. So you can kind of get a sense of how my studio is. And so here's, and that's the best part. So you can see like I'm working on it, and then I'll sketch out part of my composition. And so I'm able to make decisions. This is, I don't know if this makes sense, it's kind of madness, but paintings come out and exist and go out in the world, so that's good. This here is just a studio shot. I'm sanding down this piece. So this is the first, you know, where I'm at right now in my painting practices, I'm really thinking about surface and texture and the history of my mark making now. So and so I'm wanting to reveal these different steps and stages of my work. And so that's one of the finished small pieces. Top, please, red and Klamath. Ism. So these two kind of go together. And with abstraction, you know, there's not much, I don't want to say too much about it. I was just, you know, looking at a lot of beautiful jewelry. The other artist I was in residence with was Santo Domingo Pueblo, so he took me to his pueblo, and, you know, I got to go for feast days and, you know, buy beautiful jewelry and just meet a lot of Native artists down there. And so the colors just, I just instinctually respond to the places that I'm at and where I'm at. And okay, so let's see, this is at UCross. So I was in Wyoming, so this is the opposite. So in April, I was in Santa Fe. In September, I was in Wyoming, and I was the only person of color, let's say, there, and it was cowboy culture, and I was kind of freaked out at first, but then I got really into it, and I was like, well, I'm here for a month, and they're feeding me, so so I just took, and the other thing I wanted to note in Santa Fe is that was a green campus, and I'm an oil painter. I'm very stinky, and I kind of hit a toxicity level at that point that I was like, I need to move and the materials really starting to impact me. But I love oil paints. I have just an obsession with them, and I'm so used to them now that I'm in this big transition of, do I use them or do I not? And I don't want to make myself sick. So I ended up in UCross in Wyoming really just playing around, and I was bringing rocks in, skulls in, but there was bees in the skulls, so that wasn't a good idea. And I was just stacking things and making iPhone films. I stopped by the Crow Agency and picked up some medicine, some sweetgrass, playing with maps. I was just really kind of getting exploring, and then you'd go places and see this, and it was kind of traumatizing. There's a lot of taxidermy in Wyoming, and I don't know what is going on here. This is like a jackalope, or is that? And like the horse skull. So you get to be an artist, and then you like see everything as art, and you're like, what's going on? Because art's like a reflection of culture, right? And there was a lot of animal heads everywhere, and it was really disturbing to me. And I was like, I think that they see me like this. I don't know. And I mean, the people at the residency were great. I made great friends. We had a really good time. But it was still very, very strange. And I feel like I kind of was like, I'm researching America. So I was approaching it with that mindset. But I had a lot of fun. So I kind of switched up my studio. I ended up designing the drawing station that was like my math to my math and size, and was just kind of playing around with drawings, taking them off. Scribbling, I was thinking things of like note stations. So I just totally changed my studio practice around. And I was also at the time studying, I went back to Joseph Beuys and thinking about this artist from Germany who came over. He did this one piece called I Like America and America Likes Me, and he comes over. Well, I could talk about Joseph Beuys for a long time. So anyways, he was an artist. He comes over. It's the only time he ever went to America. He lived in a gallery space with a coyote. And that's it, and for a week, and the coyote was shitting on, oh, excuse me, I'm in a museum. It was going to the bathroom on the Wall Street Journal, and I was just like, wow. So I was kind of thinking about that piece when I was there. So these are the coyotes, and it says America Likes Me, and then there's a trick, right, because coyote's trickster. So yeah, my palette's changed a lot, and I'm really, really simplifying, so I'm going back into and here's rugged individualism. Once all the coyote, and you're all by yourself. And actually, I'm in Eugene, so I will reveal something. So we grew up here, I think a lot of people from family school might be around. And it's an alternative educational model that my brilliant mother helped design. And one of the things we did was juggle. We learned how to juggle. And so I had juggling balls in my studio, and that's what those two marks are, as I was chucking them at the wall. So like stuff like that was happening. And I was thinking of different ways to make marks and express. Yeah, you can take out a lot of energy and anger and all sorts of stuff in the studio. So art is very healing. So this is a piece I'm in. This is like a recent work. My friend Sarah Farrell-Smit invited me to be a part of this publication. So basically it was us making art with a copy machine, and it became a book, and it's called On Time publication. It's 12 women artists. And I can't remember the entire thesis of like what this project was, but it was really fun, and I just showed up with a lot of my photos and had some fun. That's my cordage bracelet, and my other bracelet that my niece gave me, Kathy Rich, beautiful, the beaded piece. And there's that little chair I found in Wyoming where I'd sit and contemplate rocks. Okay, so that's kind of my studio practice. Indigenous mentorship. So I've been, after grad school, I've done like drum making workshops with other artists, basket weaving, and I'm currently in a carving workshop with Sharad Yunker and other Native artists. So I'm going to share first about my mentorship with Corning Gould. So this is Corning Gould. I have so much respect for this woman, and she's a brilliant basket weaver. She's a master basket weaver. She's Wishram, so she was born on the Warm Springs Reservation. And this is one of her baskets, and you can see that Pat was a mathematician, and that makes a lot of sense to me. If you want to be a good basket weaver, be a mathematician first is like a great prerequisite. And so she's working in the traditional techniques and styles. This is a yarn basket, and you can see that's the condor, and the condors used to fly through the gorge, and now it's airplanes. So, through her basket, she's telling traditional indigenous memory and story and knowledge of the land that we're on, and she's also reflecting the contemporary, place that we're at. So here's a city, but underneath it are those Chinook designs. And the mastery, right, to be able to figure out how to make a basket like this. This is in the High Desert Museum in their collections. So I was down there, and they pulled that out for me, and I wanted to share that with you. And she's received a BA in mathematics from Whitman College and has taught mathematics and worked as a mathematician computer specialist. Her work is represented in major museums nationally and internationally. So Pat applied for a grant to teach kind of urban Native artists her art form of basket weaving. And so I was in mentorship with Sharad Yunker, Brittany Britton, Sharad's Kus Kokil, Brittany Britton is Hoopa, and myself. And so we went out to Ridgefield Wildlife Refuge, which is not maybe traditionally where her people would have harvested, but it's clean, it's not polluted, and so that's really important of where you're harvesting. And we harvested our tule and cattail as well as sweetgrass, and I still have a lot of that material. We've also, part of this mentorship, worked in the Portland Art Museum, just studying baskets, and these are from all kind of the southern Oregon, northern California tribes, and here are Klamath Modoc baskets. These are from the Burke Museum. So I've gone on to study and do research in these museums, and I would probably need to work with another mentor from Klamath to be able to identify the difference between Klamath and then downriver baskets, and it has to do with the turn. I think Klamaths weave to the right, and the downriver tribes weave to the left. So, and then I found out that the Klamath baskets all have cordage as their warps, and I make cordage, and I realized how much work this is, and it blew my mind, like really understanding the mastery of, and that it takes families to weave these baskets. And so I'm weaving with my tule, and it's like kind of big and chunky, and it impacts, like how my baskets are, but I'm just learning, and I'm at the beginning stages, and I hope someday if I'm not living in a city and weaving are really difficult things to do. So here's some of my baskets, and really the whole time I've been trying to make a hat like these, but so there's this curator named Todd Clark, and he curated this exhibition, Woven, the Art of Contemporary Native Basket Weaving, and you can see Todd's curatorials. What he wanted to do was really highlight the artist and the weaver as not as an artifact and like locked away in a museum, because unfortunately in a lot of collections and museums, that's how it's viewed. It's sort of viewed as a craft object or as primitive, and that if you look at the labeling on them, it'll just say like Klamath, Klamath weaver. The identities were lost of a lot of these artists, and it's because a lot of them were stolen. They were stolen from our people, and now they're in these museums, and there's, we have a lot of work to do to repatriate the sacred objects and work that's in museum collections, and really do that history, find that and bring Native people, Indigenous people into the museum collections. It's really, really important. And so I was able to go to the Burke Museum because you can apply for a grant and go and just study those collections. But it's spiritually, it's intense being with your ancestors in the vaults, and like that's the only way that I'm learning this. And it's a good thing. I want to be learning it, but it's a lot of heavy stuff too. So here's that. I was a part of this exhibition, and so you can see at this phase in my painting, the basket weaving was really impacting my abstract compositions. So you can see really bold graphic designs, and that's because I was not skilled enough yet to figure out how to. I'm still not skilled enough to figure out how to put the designs into the baskets. So you can kind of see the impact of this research in two different aspects of my work and practice. Drum painting. This is a large elk hide that I stretched over it's 3 feet by 5 feet, 36 by 60. Is that right? Yeah. And it's over this industrial frame. So this is where it's exhibited in Seattle. So it's gray, kind of gray out. But when the sun shines through, the shadows are just brilliant. And so this piece changes with outdoor lighting. And so I've gotten really interested in, I'm going to be working with similar work for the High Desert Museum installation. And I laced this as I had with the smaller hand drums. And this is like in my backyard you have to get a swimming pool and soak it all. But I was working with 150 feet of raw sinew to be able to lace up and make this drum. And it started drying, so it was kind of I smelled like that elk for a long time, and it was a pretty intense experience. But it's a piece that I never painted it, because once the light comes through and the shadows change, that's the bamboo and the lace pouring through. This is on my front porch, and once it heats up, and then it starts to sing. It drums itself, and so it's a pretty incredible thing to experience. It's a different way of making art than I had before with just paint and drawing. And so this started when I was in graduate school, and this is a part of my thesis exhibition, and we did another group art making project together, and so a bunch of us, and the reason we started doing this because we realized that there was a lot of Native people in Portland, a lot of Native people that are working, and we were feeling isolated in the institutions and in the programs, and feeling sad and wanting just to hang out and be with other Native people and laugh and make together. Like, that's what art is. Art should make you feel good and shouldn't make you feel bad. And that, unfortunately, was happening in the critique setting, and having to defend Indigenous art, Indigenous inspired art through the Western canon lens. It just doesn't make any sense. And I was having to do word salads and do all this research and academic research and speak in really big words, and to try to convince these people to give me a degree so I could just go back out and make the work that I want to do. And apparently it worked, so I'm standing here. But this work is all the artists took the drums and painted them and embellished them, and they were gifted the drums, so they took the drums. But I asked if the drums could come back together for the exhibition, so we installed them. And I couldn't hang them on the wall because they're so beautiful, and so this is where I got the idea to put them in the windows. So I used cordage to kind of install them, and I brought the hitchhikers in, which are the sacred. My dad used to always, he'd be like, "Get that hitchhiker." We'd stop the car, throw it in. It's like to get sweat lodge rocks. And so a lot of other artists I work with, we all are obsessed with rocks. And I could give a whole lecture just about the importance of staring at rocks. And so it's sort of bringing in that Indian land. It's bringing in our ancestral connection into that gallery space. And I'm taking it off the wall, right? And so it changes throughout the day. Every time you walk in that exhibition, it's going to be different because the lighting changes. So that's sort of my thinking behind. Oh, there they are. That's a red rock from up on Mount Hood. So yeah, I'm in a current mentorship. I'm the apprentice. I have to try to remember all my roles. Remember at the beginning I said I'm an intergenerational artistic practice. So this is Sharad Yunker. He's my mentor in a carving course. It's called 5 Paddles, 5 Prayers. And it's myself, Kuna Dittmer-Beercham, Toby Linwood, and Heidi Helms. And we're all learning traditional carving from Sharad. And we're learning to make knives, traditional knives. So I just made my first knife last week. and I used it last night to start carving my first ads. And it's very therapeutic. And it's really exciting. So I didn't really have an interest in being one to be a carver, but I want to learn I want to learn these skills so that I can pass them on. I have a lot of brothers, I have a lot of nieces and nephews. I just want to be able to have those skill sets because it's really important. And I think one of the things that Sharad's teaching me is that importance of, like, how did our ancestors do it? How did they make it? And so we have those conversations in these mentorships. And the ads, like we are working in a wood shop, so we've taken some shortcuts to save time. But, like, I'm understanding the process of reduction and removing it. Whereas a painter, it's additive and I can change it. So it's a totally different thought process of, like, how do you remove and get these beautiful forms. So there's Kuna working. This is pretty early on. You can see, basically we turned these from 2x6s into, like, beautiful canoe paddles. And we're working with white cedar. Here's Toby working with the ads. That was my paddle, really at the very beginning, working on the blade. And so, what we did at the beginning was researched our tribe's canoe paddles. And so, you have to go through those old photos, and I was able to find a photo of Klamath people harvesting wokus, and you could see their canoe paddles. So that's where I based mine off of. So here's my paddle, my first paddle that I've made, and once it was done once I was done carving it, we burned it. So it's charcoal, and so that burning is how we turned it black. And then I painted it with acrylic paint, very simple designs, and now I've been oiling it. And so this process of oiling it will just be ongoing with the life of the paddle. And I'm gifting my first paddle to my brother, Lalik. So it's pretty exciting. But he can't have it yet until we're putting together an exhibition of all of the group's work, and so that will show. And yeah, it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun working with knives and whittling. But I'm in undergrad. When I first took my foundations class, one of my professors was missing 2 fingers, and I remembered that. And so I'm really cautious. I need my fingers, so I'm really cautious around sharp blades and knives. So this is actually really good for me. I'm learning to slow down. And so, yeah, I do some teaching too. So with my teaching philosophy, again, I'm thinking about this intergenerational indigenous arts model, thinking about decolonization and re-indigenize. So getting back to our indigenous aesthetics. And a part of the research I've done in school and stuff is this concept that I really liked. It's called One Warrior at a Time. And I need to quote Tayaka Alfred and Jeff Corntassel, who wrote an essay called Being Indigenous. I can't remember the whole title, but it's an excellent essay, Being Indigenous. And one of the steps they talk about is that it starts one warrior at a time. So it starts with these mentorships and teaching one person at a time. And that's really the work that I feel like we are definitely doing within this NACF mentorship and the carving mentorship, the weaving with Pat. So how I was actually really was introduced to my mentor now, Sharad Yunker, is through the camp called Journeys in Creativity. And I've worked as a mentor, a teacher, and I'm on the steering committee with Journeys in Creativity. And it's a really, really important camp. It's for Native youth, age 15 to 19. It's 2 weeks. That's at the Oregon College of Arts and Crafts in Portland, Oregon. And Native students can apply for it. If you get selected, it's fully funded. And it's 12 days, and they live up at the OCAC campus. And so it's a pre-college experience. So a lot of them, it's the first time, it's a lot of time off the reservation in the city, or just out of, living with other people, with other parents. And we do field trips. So this is at the Frolic Gallery, and this is Toma Villa, my friend and colleague, and we're looking at James Labrador paintings. And there's the students, so we'll do field trips. We're at the Pittock Mansion, I believe, overlooking the city. There's Mount Hood. And so we do lots of field trips. We'll go up to Seattle Art Museum, Portland Art Museum, visit. One year we went to Warm Springs, so me and Toma we mentor and drive and take people out we did a canoe. We went out in the canoe on the Deschutes River. So it's a lot of connecting with communities as well as kind of the professional art world as well. Here's two students. This was fun. This was the printmaking year, and you had partners, and one was the dirty hands person, and the other was the clean hands person for picking up the paper off the. So I thought that was a cute photo. And then they have a summer camp up at OCAC, and so all the kids from the summer camp are watching us out the window. So that's a fun day. So this is last summer, and so a part of what I've worked with too is, so there's Corning Gould, and I can't remember this really lovely young lady's or their work here, but this was screen printing. I believe that it was screen printing and basket weaving. So the themes change every year, and they do different mediums and genres. And here we are. So I help organize the exhibition and kind of set up a critique, as well as write artist statements, which are really hard, if anybody knows that. Okay, I'm going to start to share with you all a little bit about my influences and inspiration, so other artists, colleagues, and a group I work with, Signal Fire. So growing up here in Eugene in Oregon, I was surrounded by incredible artists, and this is Rick Bartow. Rick has passed on and went on the journey last year. He's a really important artist to cite and talk about because his work and that emotion and like that transfiguration. There's so much that's happening with his work, and just kind of leaving just that line on the bottom half of the composition. So if a trick you can do is like take your hand and cover up one half, and you see if it works. Does it work by itself? That's how you can figure out if it's a good if it's working, right? And so he's able to, like, I thought he was the one who inspired me to think about like that bottom half, like in the Wokus Gatherers painting, where it's just pure abstraction on the bottom half. And so those are the types of things that I was looking at, and then the power of like how you can use the red and these really powerful colors. He's also a carver, so this title, From Nothing Coyote Created Himself, is the title of this piece. I don't want you to get confused. And this is, he's very expressive, and he's influenced by Fritz Scholder, who is a Santa Fe artist. And there's just this, like, how much expression, right, you can have, and what a story you can tell or reference, but how you can also hide things in abstraction as well. James Labrador has been a really big influence on me. He's a prolific painter. Actually, let me say one more thing. With Rick Bartow, I got to work with Rick right after undergrad school. So I went out to Siletz and worked at a camp with Siletz youth, and I got to visit his studios and work in a classroom with him. And so I saw, he was a huge influence because I saw how he taught youth and like on the Siletz, for the Siletz tribe, as well as going to visit his studios. And he had a beautiful, all these different structures on his land, and he would go printmaking, go do his printmaking in a trailer, and then he showed me like the very first place he started making art, which was this little shabby little cabin, and he told me stories of like these 3 little snakes would pop out and look at him while he was drawing. So it's really great to have these people have really shaped my art practice. Including James Labrador. And so there's different times in my work where you can see the influences of these people. Because I'm studying them, I'm staring at their work and studying it. And James, I think the way he's working with an abstraction expression and landscape, though, right? It's like this, for me, they look like it's earth layers, and it just feels like the land out there, like Umatilla in the Blue Mountains if you go out there. And so James is the founder of Crow Shadow, which is a printmaking studio, and I'm really excited to announce that I got invited to do a residency at Crow Shadow this year, so I'll be heading out there and doing some print work. So another influence is Sky Hopinga. Sky is, I didn't put his tribe, he's HoChunk, and he's a filmmaker. So this piece is called Dislocation Blues. It's a film, it's 16 minutes and 57 seconds from last year, 2017. And these are film stills. So Dislocation Blues was a film that Sky made from his experience traveling to Standing Rock. I think he said he went there three different times. And I met him out there at one point, and so at one point when he was at a process of making this film, he shared it with me, and I got to watch it and gave him some feedback. And so I feel it was incredible to watch this film, having my own experience. And I think that's the main thing, is that, and what this film's about. So he interviews two people at the camps there, and it's sort of it's Dislocation Blues. It's sort of a glimpse. It's not making any grand statements or saying this is, what happened. It's just like this glimpse into two people's experiences. And it's so well done. I was very moved, and I've watched it many times now because I've screened it. So I screened it at a film festival in Portland called Unwalking in the West, that Signal Fire and One Flaming Arrow coordinated at the Hollywood Theater. And it's just been an honor to be able to work at that level, to be able to meet up, and then how do we express ourselves from having these really being a part of things that are happening in the world right now. And so these are just two stills that are from the film Dislocation Blues. And so this is an image. So Sky Hopinga, so I work with another organization of Indigenous artists or Native artists called One Flaming Arrow, and it's Intertribal Art, Music, and Film Festival. And we have done there's a lot of people involved, and it's changed over the years. This is from 2016, and Sky came on and he curated a night of experimental films that we screened in Portland. And this is at the Rainmaker residency that I was a part of for a year. And so this was kind of how we've worked together as, in different formats. And this is Carly Smith. You can see her there too, and she's my colleague with One Flaming Arrow. We've done a lot of work together. This here is a burial ground sound. So Eugene, you all might know them. This is Kunu Dittmer Beerchum and Fish Martinez, and they're performing at the No Oil Trains in the Gorge Rally in Mosier, Oregon. So this was, it had been a year since the train that blew up, and it was extremely frightening. Like if there was winds, it could have burned down a school. And so we were all out there rallying and protesting, letting people know that we do not want these oil trains coming through the gorge. And they're a hip-hop crew, and they perform, they all have their solo individual practices, but they come together. And this was at a Burial Ground Society pop-up shop. So we started at Future Shock. And so the thing with One Flaming Arrow, and I think what also and Kuna has worked with us with One Flaming Arrow as well, is that the question is, well, if we're not necessarily making into the dominant spaces, where can we show up and make art? To show that we're still here and so alternative venues, that's the term. So it's where can we show up and scream? So Natalie Ball has a piece called War Hoop Flash Mob, where we literally go to the Portland Art Museum and war hoop, and that is really an awesome thing to get to experience. I've never war hooped in a museum before. So it's the same thing, going out of record shops, or this is at Toby Linwood's Tattoo 34 shop. And so it's really fun to be a part of such a supportive community, and just to be inspired by one another. That's what I think art should be about. And so this is Natalie Ball's work. She's a Klamath Modoc artist, and she is currently studying at Yale, working on her MFA degree. And Natalie's work has changed a lot in that it's kind of moved off the wall, and it's turned into the gallery space in a much different way, and it's becoming very performative, which I'm really excited to see where her work is going. But I thought this was a really stunning image. And here's a picture of Natalie. So she also did that residency at the Burke Museum. And so studying, so we have very similar, a lot of artists, we're doing similar things, doing this research and going into museums and institutions and doing that work to kind of decolonize them. and it's a lot. It's heavy and it's intense and it takes time, but it takes good relations as well, and kind of bringing that energy into these spaces. And I just respect and I really appreciate the work that Natalie's doing. And here we are up in Portland at the Activists Mobilizing for Peace. We all actually gave a presentation to talk about the Jordan Cove project and the Pacific Connector Pipeline project through Southern Oregon. And so here we're making flags with a design by ASA Wright, who's also a MODOK artist, and this is Victor Ortiz. So we worked with one of his screens. Victor is from Mexico, and we all met up at Standing Rock, actually in the Art Tent, so we were doing a lot of screen printing when we were there. Here is Post Commodity. So this is a group of artists that I find very inspiring. They're very smart, they're really smart, and because they're wearing masks. And so I thought, oh, that's really smart. You gotta mask up as an artist, because then the work really can speak, and it isn't really about the individual of the artist. It's about working in collectives is very interesting. And they did this incredible piece called Through the Repellent Fence, and then there was a documentary that was made about this land art installation. And you can visit their work at postcommodity.com. So here's an image of the work, and I don't want to mess it up, so I'm going to read from their website. So keep that image in mind while I read this next slide. Oh, it's right here. I don't want to show a slide just full of text. Okay, so Repellent Fence is from 2015, Land Art Installation and Community Engagement. And it's made out of earth, cinder block, paracord, PVC spheres, and helium. And the installation view, it goes across the US-Mexico border and is stitching together two communities, the Douglas, Arizona, and Agua Prieta, Sonora. So it says the Repellent Fence is a social collaborative project among individuals, communities, institutional organizations, publics, and sovereigns that culminate with the establishment of a large-scale temporary monument located near Douglas, Arizona, and Agua Prieta, Sonora. This 2-mile-long ephemeral land art installation is comprised of 26 tethered balloons that are each 10 feet in diameter and float 100 feet up above the desert landscape. The balloons that comprise Repellent Fence are enlarged replicas of an ineffective bird repellent product. Coincidentally, these balloons use indigenous medicine colors and iconography, the same graphic used by indigenous peoples from South America to Canada for thousands of years. The purpose of this monument is to bidirectionally reach across the US-Mexico border as a suture that stitches the peoples of the Americas together and symbolically demonstrating the interconnectedness of the Western Hemisphere by recognizing the land, indigenous peoples, history, relationships, movement, and communication. And it was only up for a few days. And I didn't make it down to see the installation. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about Signal Fire. So I'm in a really lucky situation that my job is one of the most inspiring parts for me, living in the city. And so Signal Fire, we are a nonprofit, and we take artists out on backcountry and travel trips. So we do like backpacking trips, canoe trips. We do outposts where we set up these big canvas tents and set up a cot and a little table. And then we go and camp somewhere else, and we'll make you dinner. And then you get to just live in this tent for a week and do whatever you want. And really cool artists get to come out with us. And so it's groups of like 12 artists. And we do trips all over the American West. The names of things after a while, I'm like, what? Yeah, anyways, but yeah, all over the West. We've gone out to Michigan too, the Great Lakes, when we were doing the wolf year. And this is last year this is right at Summer Lake. So we went and walked over and visited Playa. And we went backpacking into Heart Mountain. So here we are in southeastern Oregon. And we hike in and we camped for a few days next to this really incredible creek. And it's really empowering to be like, I made it over this waterfall, and we did it. Yeah, it's like, you feel good, and having a bunch of artists out in the woods just like drinking out of a creek, it's pretty cool. I'm about to get my wilderness first responder so that I'll be able to be a lead guide for signal fire. And we just got back from Cuba, and that was travel and experiencing the world is extremely inspiring and influences my work and my paintings and my practice. Just seeing the art on the walls, seeing the revolution on the walls, it's incredible. And visiting the gallery spaces, Fábrica de Arte, seeing the work that has been made in Cuba for the since the revolution in 1959 was very empowering. And I'm still processing that trip because we just got back. So there's a lot to learn. And yeah, so we got back from Cuba, and then we have right now. I'm going to use this to tell you all about a pipeline project proposal that's extremely dangerous through southern Oregon, and it's called the Pacific Connector Pipeline. And they want to, it would be like putting it would be a 235-mile pipeline, and this is us protesting in Salem. We're doing a rally, and we're asking Governor Kate Brown to please come out and oppose this project and be a climate leader. And these are signs made by ASA Wright, artist there, and colleague and friend. And so we worked with another artist, a non-native artist, Roger Pete, who helped us, who's with a collective called Just Seeds, and helped us kind of actually create these signs. And so that's an ongoing project that we're working on as well. And here we are, telling everybody where to go. So we got to organize where the artist, where all the signs go and where the text go. So this is really important. And if you go to rogueclimate.org, you can learn more about this project and how to get involved. And I'm really encouraging all Oregonians to stand up and because we do not want to see Oregon destroyed. We don't want a pipeline through southern Oregon. It would be destroying ancestral homelands. And just the Jordan Cove terminal alone in Coos Bay, you'd have to dredge out. It would just destroy the fishing, oyster, it would be impacting all of us, not just Indigenous culture. And so we fought off these LNG projects twice already. This is the third time they're coming around, and we need everybody to scream about it, please. Okay, so here's the project proposal. You can see it through. It would go under, I think it's 400 waterways. And so it would be impacting all the downriver tribes as well. The Klamath tribes and I believe it's Karuk tribes are the two tribes. And it's three of those. I think it's Karuk and Yurok and Klamath are the three tribes that have come out in opposition to this project proposal. Okay, that is my presentation, and I want to say, thank you very much, and I want to thank my parents, Al Smith and Jane Farrell, for bringing me into this world and being an incredible family, and to all my extended family for all of your support. I want to express that having a strong community is really amazing and really important as to have a creative practice and be an artist. I want to thank all the Indigenous and Native artists working to decolonize art. Keep it up. And I really want to give a big thank you to the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art for this opportunity to talk to you tonight and for the exhibition. So thank you. How are we for time?
Well, do you want to take a couple questions?
Let's take a couple of questions. I would actually, to acknowledge that we're on Indigenous land and to, I would also like to just acknowledge the Native community in Eugene. So I'm going to open up the first two questions. Oh yeah, clap. It's a really, really strong community. I've grown up here. My whole life at the Longhouse, at the U of O, and want to just honor the work, that my dad did with the fight with Al Smith versus Oregon. So there's a lot of connections to this place, and we want to acknowledge that. So in that spirit, I want to ask the first two questions to be from Native audience. It's okay if you don't have any questions. No one? Okay. Well, oh, Rowena, Nina. Hi.
How are you?
Good.
The part where you were showing the paddles.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been.
Hand you the
My name's Rowena Jackson, climb with Moda. So I was thinking about the paddle that she had up there, and I'm also like working on trying to understand all the artwork and traditional things that I missed out on as because when as I grew up, I missed out on a lot because of the way I was brought up. So I missed out on a lot of the traditions and the cultures. So when I saw the paddle, I was thinking, I haven't seen anything to help me understand what any part of the paddle was about. So I want to thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Nina. All right. Yeah, that, I guess I'll talk about the paddle. Yeah, so well, it's funny because I was carving at the Longhouse last night, at the Yuval Longhouse, and Gordon was describing the Klamath paddles as being more round. So then I was like, well, okay, maybe, but so I'm sure there's different styles of paddles, but from that one, I was trying to make a traditional Klamath paddle with that, and it was designed to my body as well. So they were trying to say that the paddle should be between like your chin and your shoulder. So it was kind of designed to my size. So Layla, you'll have to. Yeah.
This is kind of funny because yesterday I was in Portland and I was having lunch with a friend, and I was thinking about the paddles, and I was sitting there eating my sandwich, and you know those toothpicks that they put in your sandwich in the middle of it? So, I really believe in, the power of thought, and what you're thinking about comes about, and like how bad do you really want to know something, or you bring it into your life because you think about it. So these were what my toothpicks look like. Paddles. And so, just wanted to share that.
That's it, right there. Cool. Okay, other questions? I saw a hand. Yes?
Are the baskets and paddles that you made designed for use or simply for display?
The paddles are definitely made for use. Yeah, the intention is very clear that they will be going back into the community or into families. And we're making knives, and the point is definitely, the intention is to share that knowledge, and so that we can, it's a revitalization of culture, and that's definitely the intention. With the baskets, they started making a basket is really hard. So they started going different shapes, and I just had to go with it. Some of them tip over, so I don't know how functional they're going to be. Another question? What was that, Anita?
A lying down basket.
Yeah, it's a lying down basket. It's tired, it fell over. Yes?
I had a quick question about, could you talk about the elk that you used in your artwork?
Mm-hmm.
The background of that, where did you get from?
Great. The question was about the drum painting and the elk. And with that, I actually purchased it through a company called, they're based up in Washington. So I did not go through the hunting process and the tanning process, which is something I do want to learn. But I'm juggling a lot of different practices in. So, but the intention there is to learn how to tan a hide and work with that material if I'm going to use it. And but it's a lot of Native people go through. I'm just spacing on the name of the company, but they work and have really good practices in their hides and work with a lot of Native communities to provide drum kits and learning how to do that. So, yeah. Oh, great! I wrote on more of these for a reason. The question was, where did I get the earrings? And they're made by another artist who is living in Portland now, but lived in Eugene too, and Pam and Pam Brooks. I spaced on the last name. And so Pam, I bought these from Pam last week. Actually, they're so beautiful, and I wanted to wear them to this talk, so and promote Pam's work. Anita.
Are you allowing to be an artist? After hearing you and seeing and just getting advice in all these meetings and all these the vibration of the art
Thanks. Anita Rojas wants to be an artist. And I am fully supportive of you, Anita, to be an artist. Working with materials is there's a fluidity and like it's inspiring to, with the carving especially too, because you're thinking about the wood and the spirit of that, and so it's exciting to experiment. It's experimental, I guess. That's the part that I like. You can kind of try anything. It's freeing, which can also be stressful, because in art you can kind of do whatever you want.
So I'm the mother. But I wanted to, if people have not gone to Oregon OPB Art Beat,
Oh my gosh.
not seen, they did a beautiful documentary of Ka'ila's art practice. And you get to see her in her studio, and she speaks a lot about her primary influence, which was her father. And they do a nice history. I think the producer of that documentary did an outstanding job. So I suggest you.
I brought my mom in to promote my art practice.
Early in the presentation, you had a couple images of the people harvesting, it looked like some kind of water. Waku, is that the word?
Locus.
Locus. So what is locus?
Yeah, great question. So the question was referencing to the photographs of the wokus in reference to a painting I made called Wokus Gatherers. And yeah, wokus is a food sustenance for the Klamath people, and so it's harvested from the lily pad flowers, and it's a very complicated process that I've read about. I've not done it yet, but my friend Natalie and Taylor Tupper from the Klamath tribes went out and they did a wokus harvest last summer. So and we have the Wilsons. There's people that are doing this, that are doing the harvesting, and actually on my dad's 95th birthday. Bobby Wilson brought Al some wokus, and he hadn't had it since he was a little boy, and it was the first time that I got to put it in my mouth and eat it, and so that was really special, and so it's inspired me to want to make a paddle and a canoe and go out there. Gordon Bettles told me how to pull it out of the lake yesterday, so these are long processes, and it's hard living way up in Portland, the city, and Nina, you probably know this, there's a lot of traveling and commuting to be engaged in community and go to tribal meetings, doing that work, the harvesting, and it's just, it's that split-headedness too, it's two worlds, and then you go to galleries and museums, there's a lot to kind of have to be balancing, and so we just got to go once, baby steps at a time, but one warrior at a time. That's why I like that theory. Okay, Will, yeah.
Really enjoyed experiencing, watching your development over the years, becoming an artist that you are now. And I remember when you first went to the MFA program, I believe it was, in Portland, and I remember you posting kind of like the difficulty of it and the challenge. Can you talk a little bit about that? I'm sorry I came in late, so I might have touched on this, but how is that maybe in the two worlds kind of aspect of trying to maintain your native identity through this process?
Will's question was about how to maintain an Indigenous identity, kind of going through the educational institutions and the art. the art school experience. It was hard. I had a really hard time, and luckily though I started working. Actually, Wendy Red Star was my mentor at PNCA, and she told me about Sharad Yunker and the camp Journeys in Creativity. And so me and Sharad met, and so actually Sharad has a network of artists who are invited to come in and teach at that camp to be models for the youth. And that was a really important time. So then we started just having like let's just make art together. Let's just have studio visits. So we just started doing studio visits and meeting up with other Native artists in town. And so then, and ultimately after we graduated, that's when One Flaming Arrow started. So then we really liked coming together, meeting, laughing, and being able to share like the hard difficulties. The main thing I think was that a lot of people are not educated about the true history of what happened to Indigenous people and the history of settler colonialism. And that's why I encourage people to read that book, The Indigenous People's History of the United States, by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. And she does a really good job at outlining the reality of that. And so but I was noticing, trying to have these conversations, all people were wanting to do was to stereotype me and put me into like this categorization of Indian art from the Southwest that people are aware of. So there was this commodification that was happening, or like you're just recreating a stereotype, or so it's this it was this issue of, is your work, it was about audience. In a lot of ways it was about audience. So I had to learn how to navigate that discussion of knowing that sometimes I'm talking to people who come from a similar experience that I do, that have the Indigenous lens, and then people that don't have that, and that we can work with that though, and there can be a dialogue, and people can see different things in a painting, and that's where I feel the power of like the abstraction and the work, is that it can heal, and that people can see things. So I'm never trying to like dominate how people view the work. I'm just saying this is what I went through when I made it, and then it has this other life once it goes out. And I realized that after the boarding school in Mourning painting in the Portland Art Museum, and how important it is for the docents to learn how to talk about boarding school history to museum goers, because the conversation just kind of ended with the baskets, but now the baskets are coming back. And so, so my paintings have like a street art or hip hop culture influence, as well as, researching traditional art forms as well. So there can be a place for that dialogue to move forward. But it was hard. It was hard to navigate that in an institutional space where you need that academic language. And so a lot of the research I was finding was not in art, but it was in geopolitics or psychology, or up in Canada. They're doing great stuff up there. So like that Tayaka Alfred, Jeff Corntassel, and Linda Tuhiwai-Smith in New Zealand, the Maori culture. So Maori are doing a lot of research. So there's a lot of stuff happening. So I was just kind of reaching out. And so that's when I got to PSU and did the contemporary Native arts studies. They had, I got to work with Cornell Puawardi, who was one of my mentors in graduate school, and which I am now teaching in Indigenous Nation Studies. So I was able to go there into that space, to the Native student, the student union space, and I felt comfortable. And I had it was the first time I'd ever had a professor who's Native, and that was really profound. Up until that point, I had completely separated. Like there was this is where you can be Native, and then I had to be something totally different in the classroom. So figuring that out for myself was to feel comfortable to start being able to blend these things together has been a really long journey. And I mean, it's not over by any means, but that I kind of with my friends we were like, oh, we went to grad school to figure out how to just talk, like how to explain that what you make is one thing, and then I realized what I was saying was not exactly what I was making. So just lining those two things up, that's sort of what grad school is like for me. I don't know if that answered the question. Okay, I think we have to end there. Okay, yeah.
I want to thank
Yeah.
you.